The sealed envelope trembled in Julian Sterling's hand as he stood on Elena's porch. His steel-gray eyes locked on hers. 99.9% match. He's mine, Elena. Just as I always suspected. The words hung between them like a death sentence as the coastal wind whipped around the small cottage where she'd been hiding for over a year. Have you ever had your entire world threatened by someone who once promised to love you forever? Someone who chose pride over truth and power over compassion? When billionaire CEO Julian Sterling discovered his fiancée in another man's arms, he vowed to take their child and ensure she'd never see him again. But what if the betrayal wasn't what it seemed? What if the truth had been manipulated by someone with a dangerous obsession? What would you do if the man who broke your heart and threatened to take your child suddenly appeared on your doorstep with the power to destroy everything you've built? Hey, my queens. When life brings a storm that threatens to drown everything you've built, remember this. Your truth doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. Some of us have faced men who wielded their power like weapons, who made us doubt our own reality because their pride couldn't bear the weight of trust. But here's what I know for certain. A woman who stands firmly in her truth, even when the whole world doubts her, carries a strength that no fortune or influence can match. The courage to protect what matters most, to rebuild from ashes, to hold your ground when everything is at stake. That's the legacy of resilience we pass down through generations of sisters. Your story may be questioned, but your worth never should be. The morning fog clung to the weathered, clapboard houses of Seabrook like a reluctant lover. Elena Vance stood at her kitchen window, watching the mist swirl around the lighthouse in the distance, while her son Oliver slept peacefully in his crib. At 13 months old, he was the spitting image of his father. Same stormy gray eyes, same determined set of his jaw even in sleep. The resemblance was both a blessing and a curse. A daily reminder of everything she'd lost and everything she'd fought to protect. The soft ping of her phone broke the silence. A text from Maggie, her neighbor and the closest thing to family she had in this coastal hideaway. Black sedan with tinted windows just pulled up at the harbor shops. Man in suit asking directions to your address. Elena's hands trembled as she set down her coffee mug. After 22 months of careful anonymity, of building a life where no one knew her past, of nights spent looking over her shoulder, he had found her. Julian Sterling had come to collect what he believed was his. She moved to Oliver's room with quiet urgency, her heart hammering against her ribs. The baby slept on, one tiny fist curled against his cheek, unaware that his world was about to change forever. Elena brushed a gentle finger across his dark curls, memorizing every detail of his perfect face. I promised I'd protect you, she whispered. And I will. The crunch of tires on gravel outside her cottage sent ice through her veins. Elena straightened her shoulders and moved to the front door. If Julian Sterling wanted a fight, he would find she was no longer the same woman who had fled Manhattan in tears 22 months ago. That woman had been broken. This one had been forged in fire. Julian Sterling stepped out of the black Bentley, his tall frame unfolding with the precise, controlled movements that had become his trademark in boardrooms across the globe. At 38, he was at the pinnacle of his power. Sterling Innovations had just crossed the $10 billion valuation mark. His face had graced the cover of Forbes twice in the past year, and his reputation as a brilliant but merciless businessman had grown to near-mythic proportions. Yet as he stood before the small white cottage with its blue shutters and wild garden of coastal flowers, he felt none of that power. Instead, a strange hollowness expanded in his chest, the same emptiness that had haunted him for months. Wait in the car, he instructed his driver and the stone-faced attorney who had accompanied him. This is private. The attorney, a shark in an expensive suit who specialized in high-profile custody battles, frowned. Mr. Sterling, I strongly advise against speaking to Ms. Vance without representation present. Given the circumstances. I said wait. Julian's voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. He approached the cottage alone, noting the wind chimes dancing in the salt breeze, the carefully tended herb garden, the small tricycle on the porch. Signs of a peaceful life. A life he was about to disrupt with all the force of a hurricane. Before he could knock, the door swung open. Elena stood in the doorway, her copper hair caught in the morning light, her green eyes clear and unflinching. She wore simple jeans and a soft blue sweater that brought out flecks of turquoise in her irises. She looked both exactly the same and completely different from the woman who had disappeared from his penthouse that rainy November night. Julian. His name on her lips carried no emotion, neither fear nor anger, just acknowledgement. Elena. He found himself momentarily at a loss for words, the carefully rehearsed speech evaporating from his mind. She didn't invite him in. Instead, she stepped onto the porch, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. "How did you find me?" she asked. "Does it matter?" He studied her face, searching for what? Guilt? Defiance? The woman before him showed neither, just a quiet resolve that was new to him. "I suppose not." She crossed her arms. "You're here for the DNA test." It wasn't a question. They both knew why he had come, what he had promised or threatened that night. "Yes." Julian reached into his jacket and withdrew a sealed envelope. "I've arranged for a private lab. Discreet, reputable. The results will be available within hours." Elena took the envelope without opening it. "And then what, Julian? If he's yours, which we both know he is, what happens next? You take my son? You punish me for a betrayal that never happened." The bitterness in her voice was the first crack in her composed facade, and it stirred something uncomfortable in Julian's chest. "I have a right to know my child," he said, his voice harder than he intended. "A right?" Elena's laugh held no humor. "Rights are for people who show up, Julian. For people who listen when someone they claim to love begs them to believe her. For people who don't threaten to use their power and wealth to rip a child from his mother's arms." Julian's jaw tightened. "You disappeared. You took my child and vanished. I protected my child from a man who made it very clear he would use every resource at his disposal to take him from me." Her eyes flashed. "What choice did I have?" Before Julian could respond, a soft cry came from inside the cottage. Elena's entire demeanor changed in an instant, her focus shifting completely from the confrontation to the sound of her child. "Wait here," she said, disappearing inside. Julian stood on the porch, listening to the gentle murmurs as Elena comforted the baby. His baby, if what she had always claimed was true. The sound of her voice, soft and loving, stirred memories he had spent months trying to bury. Elena laughing in the kitchen of his penthouse as she attempted to teach him to make pasta from scratch. Elena curled against him on lazy Sunday mornings, her hair spread across his chest. Elena's eyes, bright with tears of joy, when he had knelt before her with a ring that had taken 3 jewelers to perfect. Before everything had shattered, the door opened again, and Elena emerged with a child in her arms. Julian's breath caught in his throat. The boy was beautiful, dark curls framing a face that was hauntingly familiar. Julian found himself staring into a miniature version of his own eyes, the same eyes that had gazed back at him from childhood photographs in his mother's albums. "This is Oliver," Elena said quietly. "Oliver, this is Mr. Sterling." The formality stung more than Julian had expected. The child regarded him solemnly, one small hand clutching his mother's sweater. "He has your eyes," Elena said, the words carrying a weight of unspoken meaning. "He always had your eyes. I told you the truth from the beginning." Julian swallowed hard, unprepared for the surge of emotion that swept through him at the sight of his son. "May I?" He gestured vaguely, uncertain how to ask permission to touch his own child. Elena hesitated, then nodded once. She didn't hand Oliver over but shifted him slightly so Julian could see him better. Julian reached out slowly, offering his finger to the boy. Oliver studied it with serious concentration before reaching out to grasp it with surprising strength. "Hello, Oliver," Julian said softly. Something shifted in the atmosphere between them, a subtle change that neither could quite name. For a moment, they were just 3 people on a porch in the morning sunlight, connected by the small hand wrapped around Julian's finger. Then Oliver released his grip and turned back to his mother, burying his face against her neck. "He's shy with strangers," Elena explained, the pointed word hanging in the air between them. Strangers. That's what Julian was to his own son. A stranger in a suit, appearing out of nowhere with legal documents and demands. The test, Julian said, his voice rougher than before. We should proceed. Elena nodded, her arms tightening protectively around Oliver. Your lawyer can come in, but just him. I don't want a parade of strangers frightening my son. My son, not our son. The distinction was deliberate, Julian knew. The procedure was quick and painless. A simple cheek swab for both Julian and Oliver, performed by a medical technician who had accompanied the attorney. Oliver fussed only briefly, soothed by Elena's gentle words and the stuffed elephant she produced from a nearby toy basket. The results will be available by this afternoon. The technician informed them as he packed away the samples. I'll wait in town, Julian said. There's no need to impose on Ms. Vance any longer than necessary. Elena's expression revealed nothing as she showed the men to the door. Oliver balanced on her hip. As Julian stepped onto the porch, she spoke again. What happens after the test, Julian? I need to know what we're facing. He turned back, struck again by the quiet strength in her posture, the protective way she held their child. We'll discuss that when the results are in, he said, unwilling to commit to a path before he had absolute confirmation. No. Elena's voice was firm. You don't get to leave us in limbo. If you're here to take him from me, I deserve to know now. Julian studied her face. The face he had once known better than his own. The face that had haunted his dreams for months. I'm here for the truth, Elena. That's all I can tell you right now. As he walked back to the waiting car, he felt her eyes on him, burning with an intensity that followed him all the way into town. Sisters, have you ever had to stand your ground against someone who held all the power? Share your story in the comments below. The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. Elena moved through her day in a fog of anxiety, going through the motions of normalcy for Oliver's sake while her mind raced with contingency plans. She had known this day might come, had prepared for it as best she could. But now that Julian was here, flesh and blood instead of the specter that had haunted her nightmares, she felt woefully unprepared. She had seen something in his eyes when he looked at Oliver, something that frightened her more than his cold anger ever could. Recognition, connection, the undeniable pull of blood calling to blood. Maggie arrived shortly after Julian left, her round face creased with concern. I came as soon as I could get away from the shop. Was that him? The father? Elena nodded, watching Oliver stack blocks on the living room rug. Julian Sterling in the flesh. The billionaire? Maggie whistled low. When you said your ex had resources, I pictured a successful lawyer or doctor, not that. That's why I ran, Elena said quietly. You don't win against men like Julian. Not in court, not in the press. He owns judges, politicians, media outlets. If he decides he wants something, he takes it. And he wants Oliver. He wants to punish me, Elena corrected. Oliver is just the means to do it. Maggie settled beside her on the sofa. What happened between you two, Ellie? You've never really told me the whole story. Elena closed her eyes briefly, the memories she'd tried so hard to suppress rushing back with painful clarity. 3 years earlier, the grand ballroom of the Whitman Hotel glittered with New York's elite. Elena Vance stood near one of her firm's architectural models, explaining the sustainable design elements to a cluster of potential clients. At 28, she was the youngest senior designer at Archer & Associates, her talent for blending functionality with beauty earning her a reputation that belied her age. The rooftop garden isn't just aesthetic, she explained, pointing to the miniature trees atop the model. It reduces the building's carbon footprint by 15% and creates a natural cooling system that cuts energy costs. Impressive, said a deep voice behind her. But what about water conservation? Elena turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with storm-gray eyes and an expression of genuine interest. She recognized him immediately, Julian Sterling, tech innovator and CEO of Sterling Innovations. His company had revolutionized clean energy storage, and at 35 he was already worth billions. The rainwater collection system, she replied without missing a beat, feeds directly into a filtration unit that supplies the building's non-potable water needs. It reduces municipal water usage by 40%. A smile touched the corner of his mouth. You've thought of everything. That's my job, Mr. Sterling. Julian, please. He studied the model more closely. I've been looking for an architect who understands that sustainability doesn't have to sacrifice beauty. My foundation is planning a new headquarters in Chicago. Elena felt a flutter of excitement. The Sterling Foundation was known for its groundbreaking work in environmental conservation and education. I'd be happy to set up a meeting with our principal architects. I'd rather talk with you, he interrupted. You clearly understand the vision. That night had been the beginning. What started as a professional conversation about building design had evolved into hours of talking about everything from childhood memories to favorite books. Julian wasn't what she'd expected from a tech billionaire. He was thoughtful, attentive, surprisingly funny in a dry, understated way. He courted me old-school style, Elena told Maggie, a faint smile touching her lips at the memory. Flowers, handwritten notes, actual dates where he turned his phone off. He'd send his driver to pick me up for lunch breaks with picnic baskets from my favorite deli. Once, he flew me to Chicago for dinner just because I mentioned missing the deep dish pizza from my college days. Sounds like a fairy tale, Maggie said. It felt like one. Elena's smile faded. But Julian had scars. His ex-wife had cheated on him with his former business partner. The betrayal nearly destroyed him, not just emotionally, but professionally. They tried to force him out of his own company. He fought back and won, but it left him wary. Understandable, Maggie nodded. He was always honest about his trust issues, said he might seem paranoid sometimes, might need extra reassurance. I thought I understood. Elena shook her head. But understanding someone's wounds in theory is different from facing them in reality. 6 months into their relationship, Elena had moved into Julian's penthouse overlooking Central Park. Their life together had seemed perfect, her career flourishing under his encouragement, his workaholic tendencies softening with her influence. They balanced each other. Then came the unexpected pregnancy. I was terrified to tell him, Elena admitted. We talked about children in the abstract, someday future. But when I saw that positive test, I panicked. Julian was in the middle of a major product launch, working 18-hour days. How did he take it? Maggie asked. Elena's expression softened. He was wonderful. Shocked at first, then excited. He came home the next day with a tiny pair of baby shoes and a diamond ring. Said he'd been planning to propose anyway. But now he had even more reason to make us a family. The engagement period had been blissful. Julian threw himself into preparations for the baby with the same intensity he brought to his business ventures. Researching the safest cribs, interviewing potential pediatricians, converting a spare bedroom into a nursery. We were going to get married in the spring. A small ceremony in the Berkshires where his grandmother had lived. Elena's voice hardened. Then Marcus Thorne happened. Who's Marcus Thorne? Maggie prompted. A ghost from my past. We were in college together at Northwestern. He asked me out repeatedly, wouldn't take no for an answer. It got uncomfortable enough that I had to switch classes to avoid him. Elena shook her head. I hadn't seen him in years. Then suddenly he was everywhere. At industry events, at restaurants where Julian and I were dining. I didn't think much of it at first. New York is a small world in some ways. But it wasn't coincidence, Maggie guessed. No, he'd been tracking me, following my career, my relationship with Julian. He'd become obsessed. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her tea. One night, Julian was supposed to meet me at this restaurant downtown. Marcus approached my table, said Julian had called to say he was running late. It seemed plausible. Julian was often delayed by work. Oliver looked up from his blocks, sensing the tension in his mother's voice. Elena forced a smile for him before continuing. Marcus sat down, ordered drinks. He was charming, normal. Then he excused himself to take a call, and when he came back, he seemed different, agitated. He leaned across the table, said he needed to tell me something important. Elena's voice dropped to a near whisper. Marcus knew Julian had just entered the restaurant. As I leaned in to hear him, Marcus suddenly grabbed my shoulders and leaned in, hovering just inches from my lips. From Julian's perspective across the crowded, dim room, it was a perfect illusion of a passionate kiss. I froze in shock, my hands coming up to push him away. But in that split second, the damage was done. Julian didn't stay to see me shove Marcus back. He only saw the embrace he had been conditioned to fear. That's diabolical, Maggie breathed. It was calculated, Elena said, bitterness edging her voice. Marcus knew exactly what he was doing. He knew about Julian's ex-wife, about the betrayal that had left him with trust issues. He staged the whole thing perfectly. And Julian believed the worst. Elena nodded. I tried to explain what happened, but Julian I'd never seen him like that. Cold, distant. He wouldn't listen to anything I said. When I followed him home to explain, Marcus had already sent him doctored photos, old pictures of us from college events, manipulated to look recent. He'd created fake text exchanges, hotel receipts. But surely Julian would have investigated? A man with his resources. Pride, Elena said simply. Julian's pride was wounded. He'd been betrayed before by his ex-wife. Finding me, as he thought, in another man's arms confirmed his worst fears. He didn't want to investigate. He wanted to be right. The night of the restaurant incident played vividly in Elena's memory. She had followed Julian back to their penthouse, desperate to explain, to make him understand. The elevator ride up had been excruciating, Julian standing as far from her as possible, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Julian, please," she had begged as they entered the apartment. "It wasn't what it looked like. Marcus set the whole thing up. He's obsessed with me, has been since college." "Convenient," Julian had replied, his voice frighteningly calm as he poured himself a scotch. "A stalker from your past just happens to be in the same restaurant, at the same table with his lips on yours. He didn't kiss me. He made it look that way when he saw you coming. I pushed him away. After I left, I'm sure." Julian's laugh had been cold, hollow. "You know what's interesting, Elena? I received some enlightening information tonight. Photos of you and this Marcus. Text messages. Hotel receipts." Elena had felt the blood drain from her face. "What? That's impossible. He faked them, Julian. Whatever you saw, it's not real." Julian had pulled out his phone, showing her the images, her and Marcus at what appeared to be recent events, intimate moments that had never happened. The timestamps showed dates throughout their relationship. "These are doctored," she had insisted, her voice rising with desperation. "That's me at the alumni event 3 years ago. He's photoshopped it to look recent." "Julian, you have to believe me. Like I believed Vanessa?" he had asked quietly, referring to his ex-wife. She had explanations too. Coincidences. Misunderstandings. "I was a fool then. I won't be a fool twice. This is different. I'm not Vanessa. I would never betray you, Julian. I love you. And yet here we are." He had drained his scotch, setting the glass down with deliberate care. "Pack your things. I want you out by morning." The memory of what came next made Elena's chest tighten even now, 22 months later. "I was desperate," she told Maggie. "I knew once he calmed down, once he really thought about it, he'd realize I was telling the truth. So I told him about the baby, hoping it would make him pause, make him think. And," Maggie prompted when Elena fell silent. "He said I was using the convenient pregnancy to trap him in a lie, that I was trying to pass off another man's child as his." Elena's voice broke. "He said once the baby was born we would do a DNA test. If the child was his, he would use every penny of his fortune to take it from me. That I would never see my baby again." "Oh, Ellie." Maggie reached for her hand. "I left that night, packed what I could carry and disappeared. I had some savings, enough to start over somewhere quiet. Somewhere he wouldn't think to look. Until now." "Until now," Elena agreed.